Welcome back to WLF Kicks. I've been really slack in doing this podcast, and I think the reason is that I haven't taken opportunities when they're presented themselves. I've kind of been too not strategic, but you know what I mean? Because that's an insult to our guest if I say that I'm being unstrategic by having him on the show. But on his last day as a full-time employee of London Skolars, Charlie de Haan, the GM. How are you, Charlie?
I'm very well, Steve. Thank you. I'm looking forward to having a chat.
Well, let's not get everyone too excited. Now, before this is weird because we're going to do like an intro and an outro all at once for some of the listeners who may not know much about you. You joined the club here, and we're sitting here at New River Stadium overlooking the ground on a Saturday night. You joined the club from the education sector, is that right?
That is right, Steve. Yeah, well remembered. So I worked at a school not too far from here in Haringey for a few years. Not as a teacher, but more kind of behind the scenes operations, managing their facilities. So that's kind of my background is more in leisure and sports development. And then obviously came onto the Skolars a few years ago. So,
I mean, what an amazing... I mean, your perspective on rugby league for people who are listening, who, you know, an absolute... couldn't be more of an outsider. Maybe if you were Taiwanese, you'd be more of an outsider. But, I mean, this is like such an open-ended question, but what have your impressions been over the last... Is it 4 years, 5 years?
3.5 years. I think I came into the role in November 2018.
Seems like 30.
It does. I think I probably aged 30 years, Steve. Yeah, but I was very much an outsider. Knew very little about the sport. Obviously, I'd watch games on TV as a sports fan, but didn't know much about the kind of inner workings of clubs. And to be perfectly honest, before I applied for the job, I hadn't heard of London Skolars before. But I suppose you could say I've picked up a lot, I hope, over the last few years. And I guess in many respects, like kind of the average Londoner, in terms of there's not that many rugby league clubs in the south, so I feel like I'm almost like a microcosm of wider London society, in that I didn't know much about the sport, but I've given it a go and kind of fallen in love with it and learnt a lot, and now I think I'll probably be a fan forever.
Now, we hear a few fans forever in the background laughing. The funny thing, I'll give you a little technical thing if you're doing a podcast on your iPhone. I used to do the pre-match interviews on Triple M with the coaches, and I would point the microphone at the bottom of your phone in their face, and it would pop all the time. So that's why I'm pointing it away, but let's hope this is usable. Strong points and weaknesses of the organisation. Like, you would go to club meetings all the time. You've seen the inside of these machinations. What are your impressions of the sort of strong points and kind of weaknesses of the way rugby league's organised in this country?
I think a strong point is certainly, and a lot of people talk about it, is it's a quite close-knit community, and I think that can be a positive. Perhaps can be a negative at times too, but I see it very much as a positive, in that people are very much there to help you, assist you, work together. I've always felt there's somebody at the other end of the phone, particularly somebody like myself coming into the sport, not knowing a great deal, particularly in those early months and years. I always felt I had support to try and guide me through the various processes that are a part of the job. In terms of negativity, I'm not sure about the wider sport. I suppose the sport down here in London is always a topic of conversation, and how it's grown or how it hasn't grown over the past years. So, as somebody who's passionate about London Skolars and about the wider game in London, I certainly think there perhaps could be a greater focus on developing the sport down here. I did an interview the other day actually, and was sort of speaking about development of rugby league in London, and somebody said to me that London really should be looked at like a country rather than just another place in England, because it's, the pure vastness of it is just like anywhere else in the UK. So I think sometimes,
or in Europe or Pacific or
yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes maybe the sport's a little bit guilty of using or expecting the same model to work in London than it does in other parts of the country. So I think that's at least something for the sport to look at if it is indeed passionate about growing the game down here and perhaps focusing on the UK ahead of other expansion areas.
I say you go to these meetings, and there's been some big ones, and I'll ask you a question about one meeting shortly, but do you sense the political kind of just how political things are in the north, and how ingrained these relationships are or aren't, and the politicking that's at work when big decisions are made? I mean, as someone who is an outsider geographically and also kind of culturally,
Yeah, I think it's been noticeable at times for sure in terms of, you can see that there are perhaps certain relationships that have been built up over this long period of time. And perhaps certain people can rely on others, and it could be difficult for other clubs or representatives of other clubs to kind of break into that and perhaps have as much as a voice as some others. So I think that can be difficult at times and challenging for some clubs to kind of get their opinions and points of view across. So yeah, but I imagine you get that in a lot of industries too. I don't think rugby league's unique in that aspect or at all. I think it does certainly work in other industries that I've seen and in other industries that I've worked in as well. So I don't think it's alone in that aspect.
Scholars were in the news a little bit this week as one of 3 clubs that didn't go to the reunification or didn't vote on the reunification between Super League and the RFL. What's the story there?
Well, to be honest, there's not much of a story. It was purely that one of our board of directors was waiting in the waiting room to be admitted entry into the virtual call and wasn't admitted entry for whatever reason. So
Zoom? We're going to blame Zoom?
We're going to blame Zoom or Teams or someone. But no, it was never Scholars' intention not to attend the meeting. It was never Scholars' intention to not vote. So it was purely an admin technical error, because our directors were ready to vote, and in fact the RFL called me about 15 minutes before the start of the meeting to confirm that they were attending, and they were. So I'm not exactly sure what happened, but it wasn't any sort of protest or anything against the council meeting at all. It was just purely because they couldn't get into the meeting.
I'm sure we've all been there. Now, I sort of came here today, opening day of League One, trying to figure out what the future is for this division, because I would say maybe 6 months ago, 8 months ago, when we heard how much the funding had been cut, that there was a lot of gloom and doom around League One. A lot of noise in the background too. A lot of doom and gloom around League One. But as we kind of sit here a couple of hours after the players have left the field after the first game of the season, and you're now becoming part-time, I believe, at the club, so you're not leaving at all. What is the future of League One? Where is it all heading?
Well, I think you're right, Steve. I think particularly after that news broke a few months ago that the structure might change, and then there was a lot of talk about whether League One had a future, and if it did, what would it look like for clubs in this division. And so I think there's been some reassurance that it sounds like the structure is going to be the same for this season and next season. So at least that gives clubs the opportunity to plan a little bit for the future. And I know there's work going on behind the scenes by clubs themselves and the RFL to drive more investment into the sport, which will hopefully filter down to the clubs in League One. So I think there's some positive steps there now. It did seem pretty negative a few months ago, and I know there was a lot of concern at the club here and other clubs that I've spoken to about whether they could even continue, or whether I suppose most owners of clubs, chairmen, CEOs, general managers try and create 3-year plans, 5-year plans, whatever it might be, to try and build their club over a period of time. And I think that was impossible probably towards the end of last year, or certainly the end of last season, and with the uncertainty over the COVID landscape as well at the time, it probably added to the drama and fueled the talk a little bit. But I think it seems a little bit more positive now. So I certainly hope there's a future for this league, because I think it's entertaining, it's competitive. Generally, you don't get one club that kind of runs away with the league. Often quite a few competing for playoff places. So I'd like to see it go the other way. I'd love to see more teams enter League One and make it even more competitive from that aspect.
Yes. So I'm sure people listening would be unimpressed if I didn't ask you about rugby league in London generally, and about the fate. The Broncos aren't having a great season. About the relationship between the two clubs, which I from my own sort of anecdotal, evidence from what I've seen has been up and down over the years. How much do you rely on the Broncos to be successful? I mean, basically, your coach went to them, a lot of your players went to them this year. And this club was going to do a deal with Toronto Wolfpack at one stage, So how is rugby league going in London? And from your perspective, where are the Broncos right now,
Well, I think a lot of people saw the move from full-time to part-time for the Broncos as a negative step. I mean, I don't know this, but it's conjecture, but I'd imagine it's not something they wanted to do, but maybe it's something they felt they had to do it at this moment in time. So, it's obviously not probably a hugely positive step for London Rugby League or wider London Rugby League, because having a full-time team down here was a huge attraction for them to bring players in. For the community game as well, it gave them something to aspire to go on and play professionally full-time in London. But in terms of a relationship, from my point of view, I mean, at the moment, it's good. The relationship between the two clubs is as strong as it's been since my time here. And I know the board of directors at Skolars are working a lot closer with the guys at Broncos, with Jason and Dom and all the guys off the field, to try and build a relationship that benefits both clubs and have a mutually beneficial relationship. And I think we saw that to a certain extent today. We've signed a season-long dual-reg agreement with them, so we'll be seeing Broncos players feature for Skolars on a regular basis in the first team. And we're looking to work closer together in time off the field as well. As I actually said today, it's my last day as GM in a full-time capacity, so there are certainly conversations taking place behind the scenes as to how both clubs can work together from a commercial perspective and an administration perspective and an operational perspective, to kind of pool our resources to make both clubs and wider London Rugby League as successful as it possibly can be. And I think we've both got a responsibility to do that.
It's your last day, so what are you going to be up to from as of tomorrow, Monday, 9 a.m. And what are you going to miss?
So I'm going to work as an operations manager at a sports charity called the London Playing Field Foundation, and they work with various rugby clubs and cricket clubs and football clubs to provide facilities for them to play and enjoy sport throughout London. So it's a little bit of a move back to my kind of operational sports development leisure roots, which I'm looking forward to, but there's also a lot that I will miss here. I'll miss the people. I'll miss being here with the players. I'll miss being educated every day because, as I said, coming into this as somebody who knew very little about the sport, I can safely say every day has been a learning curve. And I'll miss that family feel that you have when you're part of a club. Everyone here is closely knit, as you can hear in the background. A few players and fans enjoying their afternoon, kind of win, lose or draw. So I think it's a special environment to be a part of, and I will certainly miss that. But as you said, I hope to be involved in the background where I can, and continuing to help the club and help the development of the sport in however I can with the knowledge and contacts I've built up over the last few years.
Yeah, Charlie, I think you started here when I first moved here, so there's been a lot of stages, a lot of different dramas and a lot of different relationships, and I guess a lot of things tried and some things worked and some things didn't. So congratulations on all you've done. But I guess for the people listening who are rugby league fans, it's not goodbye. We're going to see you. We're going to see you around the traps over the rest of the season and hopefully into years ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll definitely be at a few games between now and the end of the season. So hopefully not running around so crazily on match days. Maybe get some time to actually sit down and enjoy some of the action on the field too, and support the guys. I'll be looking to get involved with other parts of the sport as well, assisting with the World Cup hopefully later in the year in a voluntary capacity, and helping however I can. But certainly be staying on as a huge fan.
Yeah, well, on the table in front of us, there's a pint on my side and a water on yours. So maybe there'll be 2 pints next home game.
I think that sounds like a good plan, Steve. Yeah, definitely. Sign me up.